general guidelines for this, whether you're training across the board, whether it's, again, muscle building, strength, or power, your reps per cluster, that's going to be somewhere between 1 and 3. It's going to be a fairly low number, right? Because again, we're working at closer to maximal loads. So, and we need to get through multiple repetitions here. So it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 to 3. The second thing to know is that our work to rest ratio is going to be somewhere from a 1 to 2, 1 work to 2 rest, to 1 to 3. So what does that mean? So if it took me, 5 seconds to get through my 2 repetitions, it's going to take me I'm going to rest at least 10 to 20 seconds in between each cluster. Did that make sense? Was I clear about that?
Yeah, so 10 to 15.
10 to 15.
Yeah.
So I didn't say it right. So 10 to 15.
So 5 seconds.
Up to about 20. We'll talk about kind of the difference there depending on where you're at. But again, on the 1 to 3, maybe it may be closer to 20 seconds. Probably not any more than 30 seconds. Now you're starting to dip into almost too much recovery to get the max benefit out of this. So bottom line is, if you had a number in your head, it's probably going to be somewhere between 10 and 20 seconds between each cluster, no matter where that's the easy way to kind of remember it. So 1 to 2 to 1 to 3 rest ratio. And then the rest between, and then you're going to, once you're finished with the total set, right? So you've done your total 8 repetitions, you need to recover. So now we're back to the maybe 90 seconds to 2 minutes, maybe as much as 5, depending on what you're doing and how much intensity you're actually using. Closer you get to your 1 rep max, may need to be a little longer, but I think a 2 minutes is a good number, right? 2 minutes is a great number to think about, again, that energy system kind of regenerating and being ready to go again. Is there anything we need to add to that, just in terms of I don't want to go too deep into it. I think, again, just giving some simple numbers, somewhere between 10 and 20 seconds. Again, inside that 10 and 20 seconds, that means you need to have hands back on the bar, right, on the bench press. It needs to be unracked, and you need to be going again. Yeah. It's not a long time. Initially, it may seem, especially as you're getting into that last cluster, the last 2, it may seem like very, very little time. At the front end, it might feel like an eternity, and you're like, this feels too long, this feels weird. And obviously, if you're just starting this and you're not sure kind of where your load scheme needs to be, your percentage of load needs to be, you might be wondering, what's going on? Am I feeling what I'm supposed to be feeling? Is this heavy enough? Is it too heavy? Am I going to be able to get through my last 2 clusters in this 4 sets of 2? Or this rep scheme of 8. Yeah, and
I think it's important to mention, like you said, that you're doing within that cluster, right? There's 4 rounds in that set, right? So you're doing 8 reps of 2 sets, 2 reps per set for 4 times to get 8. But then you're resting the 2 minutes and then you're repeating. And for you to be able to keep that intensity from the first 2 reps in that first cluster to, you're going to repeat it, 3, maybe sometimes even 4 times of total rounds of the cluster sets. So give yourself some time. You should feel like the first time you do the 2 reps, those 2 reps should feel more manageable than if you were doing an actual heavy, top set of just 2 reps. It should feel easier than that. Even when your goal is strength or you're working at a higher intensity, it's going to compound. This is really neurologically and total system taxing. By the time you get to that third round of the 8 reps of the cluster sets, it's going to catch up to you. And like you said, initially the 15 seconds, you might kind of be like, why am I could keep going. I need to take this. But by the time you get to that 3rd round and you're doing those last few reps, you're going to be praying you had a couple more seconds in between rounds. So just keep that in mind. And like we said with the rest times, it's going to vary based on how much intensity you're pushing. And we'll dive in more to where it's what's the goal of more strength, hypertrophy, or power? And that's going to change a little bit of the rest times. But that will impact it based on the intensity with it. So.
Yeah, so let's get into some percentages here, what we're trying to apply. So this is a little bit of setup here, is if you don't track this, if you just go on what feels good, this is going to be tough for you to do, right? And you're kind of working in the blind. And so in that, I guess I would say kind of a blanket statement is, it's not the right thing for you until you know where your maximal loads are, right? So that takes practice, right? That takes time to understand. Takes consistency and continuity in your programming. There needs to be organization to it. So if what you're doing is random, I would not suggest this at all. I would just say this is not for you. But if what you're on or have been on is a very organized, structured program where you have been tracking, this is a great thing to maybe explore for you. So we'll start with hypertrophy because I think just in the general sense of things, kind of in order, we're building a little muscle while we'll be building some strength. Then we can move into strength, and then we'll move into power. So for the hypertrophy side of things, again, for like the bodybuilder side of things, I think this is an awesome application. And you want to be thinking somewhere probably in the neighborhood of like 70 to 75%, right? And again, so this is going to be the lower percentage of the strength and hypertrophy side of things. When we get into strength, it's going to move up to maybe like more like 80 to 85% of your maximum load. So again, when you're thinking about this, we're trying to keep things time under tension. And for hypertrophy, we're generally speaking, most people are moving a little bit slower tempo. So the load comes down a little bit, right? Versus strength, there is a little bit of bar speed or, speed that kind of comes into that as we're working in strength a lot of times. Obviously, mechanics need to be there, tempos need to be there, but the difference is in terms of total loads that we're using.
Well, and you mentioned this when we were maybe before the off air. I think it's more uncommon to hear this argument for hypertrophy. So I think it is important to kind of break down why there is some benefit for hypertrophy outside of the typical use, and because this is something that's used in more of the athletic realm, is usually strength and power. But I think there's argument for hypertrophy, and I kind of brought up the point that with all the data around building muscle now of getting proximity to failure and that we can see it at lots of different volumes, there's kind of been these camps of people who really, really, really push intensity, and maybe they're doing like 2 sets of 6 reps and they're not really accruing a lot of volume. And then maybe there's the other side of people who are doing like 4x15 for their exercise, and they're doing a lot of volume, but maybe not a lot of intensity. So I think the argument for this, we've seen the main driver for hypertrophy at this point is mechanical tension and proximity to failure, and the kind of marrying those two things. And I think for both parties, this can help you really push the envelope in your goals for hypertrophy. So if you're someone who really pushes the intensity, but you're only getting 12 total reps because you're doing 2 sets of 6 with high intensity, this can make you feel like you're getting that high intensity, but you're going to accrue more volume, which repeated bouts still matter for, yes, intensity matters, but total work that you're getting, total working sets, total volume, total tonnage of weight moved impacts your hypertrophy. So I think it's good for that person who likes the intensity and does a lot of intensity. It forces you to get up to that. Let's say if you're doing, 6 reps per set, or, but you're going to get more sets, you're going to get up to 18 total reps versus the 12 or 24, right? And then on the other side of things, I think it gives the people who, I think some of it is maybe being uncomfortable or just their goal of they like to do super high volume. It allows that person to kind of feel what working at a higher intensity works like. So if you're working at 85% intensity for the 2 reps that they maybe never really feel, but they're still going to accrue a lot of the volume. And so it's going to kind of meet for those individuals and marry you in the middle for a lot of people that really live on either side of the camp. So I think that's an argument for hypertrophy that it's not typically thought of for that, but I think it can have an application.